This place is...
Wow.
Thanks. We got some great investment advice.
Okay, well, don't hold out on us.
Avoid high fees. That's why we switched to Quest Trade. Before, we were in mutual funds, giving away 2% in high fees every year. Times 30 years. That could have been hundreds of thousands of dollars lost.
That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous would be knowing that and not switching.
Thousands of dollars lost.
That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous would be knowing that and not switching.
Thousands of dollars lost.
That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous would be knowing that and not switching.
There's fascists in the White House, caught us by surprise. People all around the world can't organize. You're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. People of every color working side by side in every town and city, breaking down the lies. They're smashing fascists, you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose, bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose, bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose, you're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. Race hatred cannot stop us, this one thing we know. Ugliness, impunity, and greed have got to go, you're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. We're fighting you at every step, won't stop until we throw you in the place where you belong. With your friends in tow, you're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose, bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose, bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose, you're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. People come from everywhere on buses, trains, and bikes. Gonna show them fascists we won't compromise in Washington. We'll shut you fascists down. Standing with our neighbors, union at our side. In the streets we're coming, billion people, why tear down that wall? You fascists bound to fall. All you fascists bound to lose, bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose, bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose, you're bound to lose, you fascists bound to lose. Authority will bring you down, you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. Bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. Bound to lose. All you fascists bound to lose. You're bound to lose. You fascists bound to lose.
That's right. All you fascists bound to lose. That's right, everybody. It's Saturday. Saturday, January 27th, 2024. This is Marxist Archaeologist coming at you on a Saturday night, folks. Me, my comrade and yours, Frenchie the Bunny, helping us out tonight. Doing what he does best, which is not stay on camera. Eating poop. Eating hay, you know, the usual. On the program tonight, a little bit on election 2024, why Genocide Joe and Trump's system has to go. We're going to talk about a little bit of a Marxist response to the Israeli Court of Justice. As well as the Canadian response to it. And what else do we have? Good article here. Immigration isn't making Canada poor. And we're going to cover this weird skirmish that's happening in the southern border. I have no idea what the fuck this is about. It's like two elements of the right-wing government aren't fascist enough, and now they're at each other's throats. I don't fucking know. Beta! Yes, thank you, Beta. And just a couple videos. And as a treat, I've got a documentary here made by CBC, as well as it features the company that I work for, which is pretty cool. We're going to learn about Huron-Wendat towards the beginning of contact with Europeans right around the 16th and 17th century. We're going to learn about what village life was like for the indigenous Haudenosaunee. No, not the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat. Sorry. Those are two different nations. So that'll be the program tonight. Plus whatever else comes up, all that and more on the Marxist Archaeologist channel on Twitch. So how's everyone doing? Hope everyone's having a good weekend. Sorry I was not able to stream yesterday. Some stuff came up with some friends. Some schedules got switched around. So I went and had a bad movie night with some friends of mine. We ended up watching, I had never seen it. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I gotta say, pretty funny show, so I'm looking forward to watching the rest of it. Alright, so what do we got? UNRWA cuts, Israelis' allies take revenge for ICJ ruling. International Court of Justice ruled overwhelmingly in favor of South Africa's charge that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Amongst its conclusions was an immediate end to obstructions of medical, food, and water aid to Palestine. In response, the US, Canada, Australia, the UK, and Italy have stopped funding for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. This is the main organization tasked with bringing aid to Palestinians. These allies of Israel, all of whom supply it with arms, justify the mass punishment of suffering Gazans because of accusations, as yet unproven, that as many as 12 UNRWA employees had involvement in the October 7th raid on Israel. The information implicating the workers comes from Israeli intelligence, some of it obtained under torture. Okay, yeah, so that's how you know it's good. It's good to go. The UNRWA employs 13,000 workers, meaning 12 workers comprises 0.04% of its workforce. To date, 153 of its staff have been killed by Israeli attacks. Workers range from diplomats and lawyers to people who load and drive aid trucks locally. Reports have not specified what role the accused workers filled, nor have they said what form their involvement took. However, the investigation plays out, the rapid move by Israel's backers can only be seen as a slap at the ICJ ruling, revenge against the court for having the nerve to expose Israel's genocidal war. That same ruling lays bare the complicity of the very imperialist and sub-imperialist powers that have now doubled down on their support for the genocidal ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. In the past, Canada has supported the ICJ in cases involving Rwanda and sanctioning Russia, but when it delivers a ruling that Ottawa doesn't like, it gives the court the stiff middle finger. The responses from Trudeau and his ministers reek of hypocrisy. International Development Minister Ahmed Hussein says aid will be channeled through other agencies, but in November, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joy was praising the UNRWA and its work getting aid to the victims, calling it the only organization able to concretely do this. The attack against the UNRWA is not just against this specific agency, it's intended to discredit any international organizations from the ICJ to the UN itself that oppose the will of the imperial powers. Anything that exposes the criminality of their unswerving support for Israel, their military bastion in the heart of the Arab region, must be undermined. The timing of the defunding of UNRWA comes just hours after the ICJ ruling, exposes the cynical hypocrites in Washington, London, Ottawa, and elsewhere for what they are, the betters of war crimes and knowing participants in genocide. We must not let ourselves be distracted by this sideshow. The ICJ ruling is a major victory for Palestinians and their millions of supporters around the world. Now is the time to raise that victory high and redouble our solidarity actions here at home. The ICJ and other international institutions are not the vehicle that will liberate Palestinians. That remains the task of the resistance movements in Palestine and the region and the international anti-war movement. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I should edit my... So there's another Marxist text on it. This one 18 hours old, a little longer. On Friday, the International Court of Justice issued an 86-paragraph written decision on the request for provisional measures in the pending case by the government of South Africa accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza in violation of the 1948 Genocide Convention. So let's see if we can find a quick video on that, kind of recapping what's happening. I'm just trying to turn this down a bit.
On this, and we want to hear from two Canadian experts in international law. Artie Imses is a former UN war crimes investigator and professor of international law at Queen's University in Kingston. He joins us from Montreal. And Sarah Teach is in Toronto. She's an international human rights lawyer and senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Artie, let me start with you. Did the ICJ get this right?
I think they did, Ian, yes. Since the events of October have kicked off, you've got 26,000 people that are killed in the Gaza Strip, 1.7 million forcibly transferred. Starvation as a tool of war is being used against these people, indiscriminate bombardment, and all of that coupled with statements of intent to destroy in whole or in part members of an ethnic group, etc., by the high command of Israel, the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, and so on. And so the court today issued a provisional measures order indicating that genocide in Gaza is plausible and that Israel has an obligation to cease its genocide of the Palestinian people. I think they got it right.
Sarah, I know this is a big question, but take at least part of it in perspective here. Was this the right decision?
I think in terms of the, when we're talking about the plausibility of genocide, I would say that they got it wrong, or at least the majority did. And if you look at the dissenting opinion of Justice Sebudente, and as well as the declaration of Justice Nolt out of Germany, and the Israeli judgment as well from Aharon Barak, I think those judgments more so got it right in terms of the plausibility. And I think what's specifically missing here is the specific element of intent. I think that we simply don't have enough in terms of evidence showing that specific element of intent, and some of those judges really went through it quite well in terms of looking at the specific statements that were used by South Africa and sort of putting those into the proper context, and looking at the dozens of clarifying statements that have come out of those same offices saying that Israel is complying with the laws of war.
So this is a court that has perhaps a lot of moral influence, at least with some, but no sort of enforcement power. Sarah, what do you think will change? Will anything change based on today's decision?
Well, I mean, importantly, the court ordered that Israel report back in a month as to how it's doing with the order. So that will probably be the most immediate next step. Perhaps we'll see a resolution tabled at the United Nations General Assembly or Security Council about this. And I think critically, if you look at the actual points that the court ordered, a lot of those points from Israel's public statements are things that they're not opposed to in principle. So abiding by the Genocide Convention, ensuring that their troops don't commit genocide, preventing and punishing incitement, these are all things that the Israeli government has already said that it will do. So probably they'll report back on those steps, and then maybe after that, yes, a resolution of some sort.
Artie, what do you think will change or ought to change now?
Well, it strikes me as odd that Sarah would suggest that the Israelis would be content for having to report to the court on measures they're taking to abide by their obligations under the Genocide Convention. Their position was very clear. It's a matter of public record. They wanted this case to be struck from the record and struck altogether. And now they have a provisional measures order against them by the court indicating that they are plausibly engaged in genocide in the Gaza Strip. Not a happy place to be if you're the Israelis. The big takeaway, of course, is that to the extent that the court has now indicated that genocide is plausibly happening in Gaza, that means third states like Canada, the United States are under a specific positive obligation to ensure that they don't, that they're not complicit in genocide, that they don't provide Israel with arms, diplomatic support, and other such support. Otherwise, they may be viewed by the court eventually to be aiding or abetting genocide in the Gaza Strip.
Mic check.
And Sarah, let me pick up on that point in terms of Canada's reaction. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Melanie Joly, did issue a statement a few hours ago saying that Canada supports the ICJ, but doesn't support the premise of the case brought by South Africa. And it doesn't address this question. Do you feel this interim ruling places any kind of duty or obligation on Canada to take some sort of action now?
No, I don't. And in fact, I think that Minister Jolie's response was spot on. It's worth repeating that we don't have a ruling on the merits of the case yet. We also don't have a ruling on jurisdiction or admissibility. All of those are still to come. This was really just a provisional measures request, provisional measures ruling. So we don't have any answer on whether or not there's been actually breaches of the Genocide Convention. And provisional measures are really just ordered to protect rights that may or may not be held pending a final determination by the court of Palestinians. So I don't think we can go quite that far. And in terms of Canada's obligations under the Genocide Convention, obligations to prevent, this is a really important topic. Critically, these obligations come into play when there's a serious risk of genocide. So all the courts decided today is that there's a plausible risk of genocide. I don't think plausible equals serious risk. I mean, I'm not sure if there's specific jurisprudence on that discrete point, but I really don't think we're there yet.
Artie, let me ask you that. Do you think Canada does have an obligation even with this interim ruling?
The jurisprudence of the International Court of Justice is clear. A substantial risk amounts to a plausible case of genocide. They're the same thing. And Canada obviously now is on notice that there is a plausible case of genocide, a substantial risk that genocide is taking place in the Gaza Strip, and is under a positive obligation to prevent it. That means it needs to adjust its position in respect of Israel's position in Gaza. Otherwise, it may be complicit with genocide unfolding in the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, we are.
I know these issues are complex and they are for many people emotional, and I appreciate you giving your analysis, especially in the limited time we have. Artie Imsace and Sarah Teach, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It declines to order the end to genocide in Gaza. Yo, comrade, I'm out drinking, so I'll occasionally, I think he meant occasionally pop in. You know what? If you're hammered, feel free to call in. On Friday, the International Court of Justice issued an 86-paragraph written decision on the request.
You're the most amazing guy. You're brilliant. You're handsome. You're rich.
Provisional measures, in quotes, in the pending case by the government of South Africa accusing Israel of committing genocide in Gaza in violation of the 1948 Genocide Convention. Employing restrained but nevertheless damning language, the judges wrote, at least some of the acts and omissions alleged by South Africa to have been committed by Israel in Gaza appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the convention. At the same time, the ICJ declined to call for a halt to Israel's months-long assault against the civilian population in Gaza, merely ordering as provisional measures that Israel comply with its existing obligations under international law and submit a report within a month. This blatant failure to demand an end to the slaughter, a demand that follows logically from the court's findings, will be seen for what it is, a capitulation to political pressures exerted by the imperialist powers. So, yeah, World Social's website takes a far less forgiving tone to the ICJ. The ICJ stopped well short of the resolution passed by the UN Assembly itself in December, in which 153 member states out of the 193 voted for a ceasefire, with 10 voting against and 23 abstaining. Instead, the ICJ merely ordered that Israel file a report in 30 days regarding its implementation of the order. At this early stage of the proceedings, which were initiated on December 29th, the judges are only tasked with determining whether the allegations are plausible before issuing interim orders. The case itself is likely to drag on for years before reaching any definitive conclusion. The ICJ's ruling will rightly be seen as a damning indictment, not only for the Israeli government, but also for U.S. NATO imperialism, which has supplied, financed, justified, and defended the ongoing genocide in Gaza. On January 3rd, for example, U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby denounced the case as meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever. On Friday, the ICJ decided the precise opposite. The ICJ decision is also a stinging rebuke to figures such as U.S. State Department spokesman Matt Miller, who dismissed the allegation of genocide with a wave of the hand earlier this month. telling reporters that the U.S. government is not seeing any acts that constitute genocide. The German government, which sought to intervene in the case on behalf of Israel, likewise stands exposed, and so does the New York Times columnist Bret Stephens, who authored a prominent column on January 16th calling the genocide charge against Israel a moral obscenity. For tens of millions of students, workers, and young people who continue to attend protests and demonstrations around the world in defiance of all the repression, violent provocations, and witch-hunting accusations of anti-Semitism, the ICJ decision will justifiably be seen as a vindication. The ICJ decision presents the following figures. 25,700 Palestinians have been killed, 63,000 injuries have been reported, 360,000 housing units have been destroyed or partially damaged, and approximately 1.7 million persons have been internally displaced. The decision quotes UN Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs Martin Griffiths, contradicting Israel government's assertions that it does not target civilians or hospitals. Areas where civilians were told to relocate for their safety have come under bombardment. Medical facilities are under relentless attack. Yeah, like this is we've been saying this since the very, very beginning. This is exactly what's happening, and like so far this is nothing we don't know already. But to hear like official governments, like world government channels, really actually admit this out loud, I guess is a step forward. The decision quotes UN Secretary General for the decision also quotes Commissioner General of the UN Relief and Works Agency, Felipe Lazzarini. In the past 100 days, sustained bombardment across the Gaza Strip caused the mass displacement of a population constantly uprooted and forced to leave overnight, only to move to places which are just as unsafe. This has been the largest displacement of the Palestinian people since 1948. That is absolutely correct. Let's see what Al Jazeera has to say.
Rafah.
Winter rain drenches the ruins of Gaza, driven from their homes by the Israeli war machine. People in the camp have fled bombs and bullets. Now they are at the mercy of the elements. Maher has been reinforcing his tent. His fears, like many others, could be blown away by storms.
The weather is very disturbing.
I'd be more worried about erosion.
The situation is very difficult. Winds are strong, it rains heavily. This is our life now. The tents fall on us every night, and you have seen yourself the condition of the tent in which I live. We ask Allah Almighty to stop this disastrous calamity, to put an end to this war, and to help us return safe to our homes.
The old and the infirm need care that's difficult and often impossible to find, and children are among those made homeless. All face the cold and drain of Gaza's winter. None have what they need to ensure their survival.
Displaced Palestinians here lack all basic necessities, and now the tents they are living in are flooding. With winter clothes in short supply, they have no choice but to endure the harsh weather conditions as long as it lasts.
Water has been pouring into tents during storms. People often feel life here is impossible, but must do what they can to get by.
The situation is very difficult. The heavy rains made the tents, mattresses, and blankets very wet. The men have managed with difficulty to use stones to create a kind of gate that prevents more water from getting in. The situation here is disastrous.
More desperate people arrive in the camps every day, driven south as Israeli forces advance. Tents and supplies are already hard to come by. Soon, they will have to stretch even further.
Tariq Abazoum, Al Jazeera, Rafah, in southern Gaza.
Jesus.
Now, the International Court of Justice says that it'll deliver its ruling on Friday on the provisional measures requested by South Africa in its genocide case against Israel. In December, its government brought the case against Israel, accusing it of genocidal acts in its assaults on Gaza. It requested emergency measures, including for Israel to suspend its military operations in Gaza. Now, the ICJ's ruling on Friday does not address the fundamental issue of whether Israel is committing genocide. That's expected to take years. Instead, it'll consider South Africa's request for 9 provisional measures. Now, if granted, that could include an order for Israel to stop its military campaign and ensure Palestinians have access to humanitarian assistance. The court could also decline to order the interim measures. Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has already hinted that he would not feel bound by any such order. That's despite orders from the ICJ being legally binding and not able to be appealed. However, the court has little power to enforce its verdicts. Earlier, we spoke to Michael Becker, a former associate lawyer at the ICJ.
The International Criminal Court of Justice, the International Court of Justice, I should say, ICJ, will deliver a ruling on Friday on South Africa's request for action on Israel's violations in Gaza. In its applications, you'll recall, South Africa accused Israel of carrying out genocide in Gaza, and it asks the court to indicate provisional measures to act against further severe, irreparable harm to the rights of Palestinian people to prevent and punish genocide. Let's speak to Michael Becker about this. He's an assistant professor at Trinity College, Dublin School of Law, and was formerly working at the International Court of Justice. Michael, good to have you with us. So just for our international audience to recap what's happened here, about 2 weeks ago, the ICJ heard South Africa's arguments at The Hague, then it heard Israel's defense, and now it's deciding on the provisional measures. What exactly are these provisional measures, and which way do you think the court will go on Friday when it decides this?
It's really important to understand that what the court is going to be deciding on Friday is not whether Israel is in breach of any of its obligations under the Genocide Convention. Those are, as you've said, South Africa's main claims in the case. This is about provisional measures. That's a kind of emergency relief or interim relief that South Africa is seeking while the case is pending. And so South Africa has asked for a number of things, but the two maybe most prominent requests are, first, for an order that would direct Israel to suspend all military operations in Gaza, and secondly, for an order that would direct Israel to not impede and indeed facilitate the effective delivery of humanitarian assistance into Gaza. And so how the court addresses those two requests, if it decides to indicate provisional measures at all, is what to really look out for on Friday.
Okay, so two requests. Is the court likely to grant one request and deny another one? Because I understand this has happened in the past, like in the case of in the Bosnia case a few years ago.
Right. So first, we'll see if the court says that South Africa met the basic test for provisional measures to be ordered in the first place. Many ICJ experts, and I would agree with this view, think that South Africa did do enough to show that its claims under the Genocide Convention are at least plausible, and very importantly, that the Palestinian population of Gaza faces a real and imminent risk of irreparable harm. And nothing that's happened in the last 2 weeks, I think, has changed that assessment. So the court isn't limited to what South Africa has asked for. The court doesn't have to say yes or no to South Africa's specific requests. If it decides to issue provisional measures, it can formulate whatever set of measures it thinks is most appropriate.
Okay.
And so while I think the court will want to say something about Israel's military operations, I'm not convinced that they will be willing to go quite as far as South Africa has asked them to go,
Which is
ordering a
what?
complete suspension of military activities.
Okay, so you don't think it's likely to order the suspension of military activities, even though we know that the ICJ, of course, is part of the UN system, and we've heard time and time from the UN Secretary General in the last few weeks, he's called for a ceasefire in Gaza. You think that is not likely to influence the decision?
Well, I think it's more likely that the court will say something that's quite similar to what we saw in the UN Security Resolution back on the 22nd of December. So that would be instructing Israel to ensure that any military operations taking place are in accordance with international law. and abide by Israel's other obligations under international law.
Right.
I think the court also will address the request relating to humanitarian assistance and direct Israel to ensure that it's not doing anything that impedes the effective delivery of humanitarian assistance in accordance with international law.
All right, Michael, speaking here hypothetically, of course, if the court grants and rules in favor of these provisional measures that South Africa has requested and perhaps other measures like you've said, what happens after that? I mean, is there an enforcement mechanism here?
So the court can't enforce its own decisions. That rests with other actors within the international system. In this scenario, it's difficult to imagine the Security Council playing a role. So really what this will do is place additional political pressure on Israel to work towards
Nigeria has called for a Security Council meeting to implement the measures instructed by the court, so the USA is going to go against the rules-based order. Oh yeah, of course.
Place additional pressure, I think, on some of Israel's strongest allies to do what they can behind the scenes to try to push this towards some kind of resolution and address the humanitarian situation.
They're going to claim the ICJ
One last question, Michael,
is Hamas.
before we let you go, and we really appreciate your expertise on this. They are deciding on the provisional measures on Friday. The court, as you mentioned early on, is not ruling on the genocide allegations, the genocide case against
No, that's
Israel
going to take
at this
years
time.
for them
How
to
long will
determine
it take to make that ruling?
that this
and
is genocide,
what do you think will be
the genocide
likely
that we're watching
outcome,
unfold on
having heard
live
South Africa's
TV.
arguments and Israel's defense?
Well, ICJ cases take a long time. We wouldn't expect to see a decision on the merits of this case for years. This is something that will take multiple years to be sorted out. And I think it's premature in some ways to offer any predictions.
I saw
here
that. We
because,
covered that a
yes,
little
we
bit
heard
already.
Each side's preliminary set of arguments. But both sides will have the opportunity to put forward much more developed legal arguments and, importantly, support those arguments with evidence going forward. But that said, the standard to demonstrate genocidal intent under international law is very high. That shouldn't take away from the fact that other unlawful acts might be taking place. But to demonstrate genocidal intent is still going to be a very high threshold for South Africa to meet on the merits.
Michael Becker, thank you very much for your expertise.
So the ICJ's decision juxtaposes this human suffering inflicted on a mass scale with genocidal rhetoric issuing the highest levels of the Israeli state, including Defense Minister Yoav Gallant's assertion that Gaza was populated by human animals, and his declaration that we will eliminate everything. The ICJ also quoted Israel Katz, the then Minister of Energy and Infrastructure of Israel, who wrote on October 13th, all the civilian population in Gaza is ordered to leave immediately. They will not receive a drop of water or a single battery until they leave the world. The ICJ concluded that these facts are sufficient to conclude that at least some of the rights claimed by South Africa for which it is seeking protection are plausible, including the right to Palestinians in Gaza to be protected from acts of genocide. While proceedings of the ICJ have been underway, Israel has continued carrying out war crimes and massacres at a relentless pace. In the hours leading up to the ICJ's decision on Friday, Israeli forces fired on a crowd of thousands waiting for humanitarian aid in Gaza, killing 20 and injuring 150. Yeah, I saw a little bit about that. That's fucking insane. 24-hour period from Wednesday to Thursday, Israeli forces killed over 200 Palestinian civilians. Referencing Israel's ongoing blockade of food, energy, medical supplies, and fuel to Gaza, the ICJ decision states that the catastrophic humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip is at serious risk of deteriorating further before the court renders its final judgment, which in turn justifies adopting provisional measures. The hollow character of the ICJ's provisional measures is underscored by the fact that Israel's... Okay, Nightbot, calm down. Nightbot just decided it's going to post 4 times in a row. Provisional measure underscored by the fact that Israel's own appointee to the court, Aaron Barak, joined in many of them, including the admonition that Israeli officials refrain from further genocidal incitement and enable humanitarian assistance to reach Gaza. For all its significance as a rebuke to the accomplices in the genocide, as Foreign Affairs magazine noted yesterday, the ICJ's decision was a political one, an attempt to find a middle ground, acknowledging on the one hand the overwhelming world concern for the extraordinary loss of life in Gaza, mass popular protests around the world that continue in the face of all efforts to discourage and repress them, but without actually ordering an end to Israel's military operation, which Israel and the United States would have almost certainly dismissed. Responding to the decision yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu hailed the court's failure to call for a ceasefire as a recognition of Israel's right to defend itself. At the same time, he denounced the court's citation of genocidal actions and statements by Israel as outrageous. Israel's fascistic Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is named in the case, denounced it as hypocrisy. Netanyahu had previously stated Israel's operations in Gaza would continue no matter what the ICJ says, saying no one will stop us, not The Hague and not the axis of evil and not anyone else. The refusal of the ICJ to even call for a ceasefire in the face of overwhelming evidence of the genocide unfolding in Gaza underscores its character as an imperialist institution. In March 2022, within weeks of the start of the war in Ukraine, by contrast, the ICJ had no such qualms about ordering Russia shall immediately suspend the military operations that it commenced on the 24th of February. Friday's ruling confirms the warning made by the World Socialist website that at the conclusion of South Africa's devastating presentation in the ICJ earlier this month, it is necessary to draw the opposite conclusion from Thursday's proceedings than those who are now encouraging illusions that they herald some rebirth of democratic, humane, and rational sentiments in the halls of the United Nations. Stopping the genocide, disarming the perpetrators, bringing the war criminals to justice will require the mobilization of the international working class on the basis of its own independent policies and class interests, in opposition to all of the bourgeois parties, politicians, and imperialist states, which will be tainted forever by their complicity and participation in Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people. Yeah, completely agree. So yeah, UNRWA, yeah, we cut off funding to them. International Court of Justice ruled overwhelmingly in favor of South Africa's charge that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. Among its conclusions was an immediate end to obstructions of medical, food, and water aid to Palestine. In response, the US, Canada, Australia, and the UK and Italy have stopped funding for the United Nations Relief and Work Agency. This is the main organization tasked with bringing aid to the Palestinians. These allies of Israel, all of whom supply it with arms, justify the mass punishment of suffering Gazans because of accusations, as yet unproven, that as many as 12 UNRWA employees had an involvement in the October 7th raid in Israel. So all they got to say is like, oh yeah, well, UNRWA, they're Hamas, obviously. The information implicating the workers comes from Israeli intelligence, so you know how great that is. Some of it obtained under torture. So good. I'm glad we've learned nothing from the last 20 fucking years. UNRWA employs 13,000 workers, meaning 12 workers comprises 0.04% of its workforce. To date, 153 of its staff have been killed by Israeli attacks. Workers range from diplomats and lawyers to people who load and drive trucks locally. Reports have not specified what the roles accused workers filled, nor have they said what form their involvement took. Italy is run by a literal open fact. That's true. Good point. However, the investigation plays out. The rapid move by Israelis' backers can only be seen as a slap at the ICJ ruling, revenge against the court for having the nerve to expose Israel's genocidal war. The same ruling lays bare the complicity of the very imperialist and sub-imperialist powers that have now doubled down on their support for the genocidal ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. In the past, Canada has supported the ICJ in cases involving Rwanda and sanctioning Russia. When it delivers a ruling that Ottawa doesn't like, it gives the court the stiff middle finger. The responses from Trudeau and his ministers reek of hypocrisy. International Development Minister Ahmed Hussein says aid will be channeled through other agencies, but in November, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joy was praising the UNRWA and its work getting aid to the victims, calling it the only organization able to concretely do this. The attack against the UNRWA is not just against this specific agency. It intended to discredit any international organizations from the ICJ to the UN itself that oppose the will of the imperialist powers. Anything that exposes the criminality of their unswerving support for Israel, their military bastion in the heart of the Arab region must be undermined. The timing and defunding of the UNRWA, coming just hours after the ICJ ruling, exposes the cynical hypocrites in Washington, London, Ottawa, and elsewhere for what they are, betters of war crimes, knowing participants in genocide. We must not let ourselves be distracted by this sideshow. The ICJ ruling is a major victory for Palestinians and their millions of supporters around the world. Maybe. If it's not, like, what material difference does this ICJ ruling actually do for Palestinians on the ground? Because so far, like, it's not going to stop. It's not stopping the bombs. So I don't see how it's a major victory. Now is the time to raise that victory high and redouble our solidarity actions here at home. The ICJ and other international institutions are not the vehicle that will liberate Palestinians. Okay, so they're steered back on course and they made the correct conclusion. They used the wrong formula, but they came to the right conclusion. That remains the task of the resistance movements in Palestine and the region and the international anti-war movement. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. So this is socialist.ca. So what's Second Thought been up to? Anyone know? I don't really follow. I just see their videos that they get posted every once in a while. I don't really keep up with like what their lives are like, you know.
And others like it are made possible by the generous support of my patrons on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the channel, join the Discord, and get early access to every video, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/secondthought. Okay, last video of the year. Hi there. This is one of those videos that will likely attract a lot of new viewers. If you're one of them, welcome to the channel. My name is JT, and I make videos about politics and culture from a socialist perspective. I made one of these last year, and I figured it'd be fun to revisit the topic. A lot of structural issues remain unchanged, so if some of this sounds familiar, don't be surprised. So let's get straight to the heart of the matter. Many of the problems in your life are either caused or worsened by capitalism. The good news is, we have the means to solve these problems. When we socialists say a better world is possible, it's because it's true. Capitalism has only really been around for a few hundred years. It's a little bit silly to assume that we just magically found the perfect system and this is how humans are supposed to live. It's not utopian to think that maybe something better can come after. And it's not being bitter or envious to criticize the status quo. Things are bad, we know why, and we know how to fix them. Every system eventually comes to an end. Just as humanity progressed from feudalism to capitalism, so too will capitalism give way to socialism. It's the logical next step in human development. If you strip away all the extra stuff, the core purpose of our species, the only thing that really matters, is leaving a better life for our children. We can no longer do that under capitalism. So, let's take a look at some of the problems capitalism creates and why it's time to move on. The example I used in last year's video was the massive transfer of wealth during the COVID pandemic. Now that the dust has mostly settled, we have better data on just how extreme it really was. According to a report by Oxfam, the richest 1% of people accumulated nearly 2/3 of all new wealth generated in the last 2 years. I'll say that again. Of the $42 trillion of wealth created since 2020, the richest 1% of people, 1%, siphoned off 26 trillion of it. Put another way, for every $1 of wealth earned by someone in the bottom 90%, the upper crust amassed $1.7 million. During the first 2 years of the pandemic specifically, the 10 richest people on Earth accumulated over $1.5 trillion of wealth, which coincidentally is roughly the amount of wealth lost by everyone else. These 10 people, already so rich they'd make the pharaohs blush, raked in money at a rate of $1.3 billion every single day for 2 years. Together, these oligarchs hold more wealth than the world's poorest 4 billion people. That is staggering inequality. In a time when 99% of humanity was struggling to make ends meet, when companies were sacrificing their workers on the altar of profit, when millions lost their jobs and had to survive on 2 tiny emergency checks over the span of 2 years, the ultra-rich were safe, isolated, and profiting massively off the suffering of their fellow human beings. One staggering statistic that really puts this wealth disparity into perspective is that if these 10 multi-billionaires lost 99.99% of their wealth right now, they'd still be richer than 99% of the population. It's hard to even conceptualize that kind of inequality, but this is what capitalism produces. It's not that capitalism is evil, it's that it is beholden to its own inherent logic, the logic of the profit motive. If the profit motive says 1 million people need to die to save the economy, then the only possible outcome under a capitalist system is that 1 million people will die. I said last year that this is not a system that works, but I want to amend that statement. Capitalism does work. It does the thing it's supposed to do, which is accumulate capital. But because of how capitalism works, we're left with a society in which the extreme wealth of the few is a direct result of the suffering of the many. And that tiny handful of multi-billionaires will only get smaller over time. An economic system constructed to produce winners and losers will always end in monopoly. Look at Google, look at Amazon, look at Disney. Every facet of our society is being consolidated under ever-growing megacorporations. And that's not going to stop. It can't. And a system that creates godlike wealth for a handful while actively preventing the vast majority from living a decent life needs to be done away with. More and more people are waking up to this fact as things continue to get worse. But okay, come on. Capitalism is an improvement over feudalism, right? We can't just throw away the best thing we have. You're right, it was an improvement. We went from a system where there was no chance of upward mobility to one where some lucky few could rise out of poverty. That's great. But the thing we have to realize is that something which could have been seen as progressive 400 years ago might not be so great today. Things change, and in capitalism's case, not for the better. Again, due to the inherent logic of the profit motive, the ruling class must always take measures to reduce costs and maximize profits. And over time, you start to run out of fat to trim. Today, 50% of all new wealth created goes directly to the top 1% of the population. CEOs of large corporations make over 350 times what their workers do, while employee wages are lower than they were 50 years ago when you account for inflation. But I could almost forgive that if half of all Americans didn't live paycheck to paycheck, or if a $50 trillion transfer of wealth hadn't gone from the bottom 90% of society to the top 1% since 1975. But they do, and it has.
Like every hour of our lives that we're working is just to shovel money onto a conveyor belt, and then the conveyor belt goes into a giant open pit owned by 10 like ghouls, and that's it. And then you get nothing for it.
And it's not just wages, it's everything else too. 28 million Americans don't get any paid vacation or paid holidays, so they hardly take any time off. And who can blame them? When wages don't even keep up with inflation, and most people can't cover a surprise $400 expense, it's simply not possible to take time off. And that's hardly surprising for a country that also has no federal guaranteed paid parental leave whatsoever. It's not just that we're getting paid less, getting a smaller share of the wealth we produce, and enriching a single % of the population despite living in the most productive time in human history. We're working more for less. And please don't think I'm cherry-picking data here. All of these statistics are from Western, capitalist-funded sources. They're all linked in the description if you want to check. Anyway, again, all of these statistics are perfectly in line with the prime directive of our current economic model, the accumulation of profit for the capitalist class. They're all justified by the fact that in some way they've allowed for a small minority of the population, incredibly powerful and wealthy by virtue of ownership of the means of production, to squeeze more out of their workers for themselves. In the last century, we've seen the gradual destruction of unions, a federal tolerance of permanent high unemployment, and a series of changes to the tax system that allow more and more wealth to accumulate at the top. Wealth is more concentrated, we're more overworked, and rampant inequality persists because this economic system has no mechanism to fix these problems. On the contrary, it thrives on their existence. What capitalism demands above all else is profit. And in order for the system to be profitable, somebody needs to get screwed over. And it certainly won't be those with the executive power to set the rules. Think of it like this. No boss out there, however compassionate or kind-hearted they are, will ever pay their employee an equal or greater amount than they bring to the company. It wouldn't make sense. What would be the point of hiring an extra person if all the money they generate goes right back in their pocket? In other words, no matter what your pay is, even if it seems incredibly generous, it's less than what you're actually worth to the company. And the money taken off the top, your surplus value, isn't going to a company fund or R&D or a collective pension scheme, nothing that benefits you or your coworkers even indirectly. No, it's going to the shareholders. Otherwise, there'd be no profit, only expenses and income. This is the fundamental truth of capitalism. The employee...
He's also describing some of the fundamental problems with co-ops, too. You know, if you work in a co-op and you want a raise, well, how do you get a raise? You have to like find a way to generate more revenue or find a way to cut costs. Well, how do you generate more revenue? Be more productive. How do you be more productive? Yeah, you got to be innovative, find a way to cut costs, or you know, you hire more people to get more product out. But you hire more people, that's more profit sharing. So you're stuck in the circle. You're stuck in that's why, like, I was asked on another debate when I was on a moronic debate stream like ages ago. Someone said, what's wrong with co-ops? Why can't you do co-ops? It's like, co-ops are still subject to the market forces of capitalism. You can't build a tiny microcosm of socialism that competes with capitalism. That's not how this works. Richard Wolff.
Employer relationship is always in favor of the employer. Because when it isn't, companies aren't profitable. And that's a big no-no under capitalism. And the rest of the economy is there to facilitate that. A consistent natural unemployment and a minimum wage that hasn't budged in 15 years together gives your boss the ability to replace you at any time. It keeps you compliant to their power under threat of poverty. And it gives them leverage to steadily increase the gap between how much money you make for the company and how much you get paid. Okay, I understand that last section may have been a little frustrating if this is the first time you're hearing these talking points. I can hear you saying, well, yeah, it sucks, but how else would a business function? It's just common sense that it has to be this way or the economy wouldn't work. And that right there is the point. It's not that the economy wouldn't work, it's that a capitalist economy wouldn't work. So what about socialism? Whereas capitalists and temporarily embarrassed millionaires believe that free markets inherently lead to the greatest societal good, socialists have a different perspective. In a nutshell, proponents of capitalism believe that along with a free market, a healthy society is divided into two classes. One that owns and controls the productive enterprises and seeks profit, and one that does not own this form of property and therefore needs to sell its labor for a wage. In their opinion, markets, even when they're imperfect, are better at making decisions than democracy is. Socialists disagree. We understand that markets follow the money, not the collective good. And side note, capitalists understand this too. They just think the average person is gullible enough to believe their propaganda. At its core, the whole capitalist system is built on a small group of unelected people having more power than everybody else and using it to enrich themselves. The socialist conception of society does away with all that. But before we talk about what socialists do want, we should briefly touch on what we don't want. Because we've all been subjected to a century of Red Scare propaganda at this point, so it's probably worthwhile to clear up some misconceptions. First, we're not trying to make everyone work in the coal mines and wear all gray and have exactly the same number of state-mandated Funko Pops. When socialists use words like equality, we're talking about making sure that everyone is afforded the same baseline standard of living. That's it. We're not trying to enforce uniformity across the board. Everyone has the same basic guarantee when it comes to quality of life. You can go out and improve that. It's not a cap on quality of life. It's just a way of saying you are a human being, and that means you deserve a modicum of dignity and security, no strings attached. Individuality, personal expression, the drive to do or become more, none of that will change. That's the best part of being human, and socialists are all about it. In fact, pursuing goals, taking up hobbies, creating art, that's all far more possible under socialism, where you've got a guaranteed baseline standard of living, than it is under capitalism, where your options are work or starve. Okay, we've said that a couple times now. Guaranteed standard of living. What specifically does that mean? Universally free, or at the very least universally accessible, housing, education, food, water, and healthcare for all. The right to a life of dignity and basic security because those things are well within our power to provide. There's too much food going to waste, too many empty houses, too much stuff being destroyed to artificially inflate its cost, and too many people making a profit by hoarding our basic needs. Socialists are tired of people being pushed into grueling, dangerous, or demeaning jobs by being threatened with eviction and starvation. Why are we so intent on holding ourselves back by keeping the majority of the species poor and unable to pursue their passions? A society that invests in itself by allowing its people the ability to flourish has a far better chance at longevity and public support than one that withholds necessities for the sake of greater profit. Another thing socialists propose is democratic control over the means of production. We use that word a lot. What does it mean? Think large companies, factories, farms, literally the means.
Something I don't hear enough Marxist-Leninists talk about is democratic control, not ownership, control over the means of production. Very, very important distinction.
By which capital is produced. We advocate for an economy run democratically and not in the search of profit. This can take many forms, whether that's a cybernetically planned economy, a network of autonomous communes, or some other method. What works in the US may be different from what works in other parts of the world. What we can say for certain is that they would all work better than what we have now. Workplaces would be run either without a boss or with one elected by the workers, and the products of this economy would be geared towards satisfying the needs and wants of society without having to be profitable to do so. If you're having a hard time imagining what a democratic workplace would look like, just think about your current job. I'll take retail as a common example. So I used to work at Best Buy as a camera expert. My job, on paper, was to help customers pick out the camera that would best suit their needs. In reality, management just wanted me to upsell people on more expensive gear. To make a long story short, the camera department is kind of detached from Best Buy proper. We technically reported to the respective brands, and we didn't have a brand manager there most of the time. When left to our own devices, the camera department had the lowest rate of product returns in the store by far, because we decided amongst ourselves how best to meet the customer's needs. When corporate started pressing us for higher profits and the GM started forcing us to upsell, the return rate skyrocketed, actual profits shrank, and the department got all kinds of negative reviews. In this scenario, and countless others across the labor landscape, the workers know best how to do their job, and meddling from an unelected manager only makes things worse.
It's like Hank Hill and propane. Hank Hill knows exactly what you need.
Democracy in the workplace increases efficiency and morale and reduces waste. It's a no-brainer. One final thing I'd like to talk about is democracy at the national level, the ability to have a say in how your country is run. In the United States, we supposedly elect people who enact policies that reflect the will of the people. It's pretty clear that this is not actually the case. Studies have shown that what the average person wants has next to zero influence on policy, while what lobbying groups want does. Because both major political parties are in the pocket of capitalist industry, particularly fossil fuels and the military-industrial complex, we end up with representation for those with wealth and power. This is something that socialists noticed over 100 years ago. For example, in his book The State and Revolution, Lenin said, "In capitalist society, democracy is always hemmed in by the narrow limits set by capitalist exploitation, and consequently always remains, in effect, a democracy for the minority, only for the propertied classes, only for the rich. Freedom in capitalist society always remains about the same as it was in the ancient Greek republics.
True.
Freedom for the slave owners."
That is the
average American.
Opinion. The only problem I find my experience with charcoal is that it takes like way too long to get ready, so it just takes a little bit extra planning. Like when I decide I'm hungry, then I gotta get the charcoal ready. Whereas propane, it's just bing boom, it's on and off, boom bing, But I agree though, like the taste you get, because like I get the charcoal going, and then once I throw my burgers on or whatever, I throw in some maple or some either like hickory or cherry, like whatever like nice like chunks of wood or even twigs that I can get my hands on, and just throw it in, and don't let them burn, but you let them like cinder, and so it creates a lot of smoke, and then you just infuse all that smoke into you just infuse that smoke in the burgers, and it's just next level burger making for me anyway. When I discovered that, I was like, man, this charcoal charcoal heat's not gonna last. I can't get these burgers on time. I started throwing whatever I could find off the lawn, like maple twigs, and it just, holy shit, it was so
Doesn't want
good.
to send billions of tax dollars to fund genocides or proxy wars. We don't want to subsidize industries that are making the planet less habitable for our children. We want labor
$7 trillion in fucking fuel subsidies. You see that? That's insane.
a better work-life balance, a healthcare system that won't bankrupt us. I'm not saying that everything will be perfect in a socialist society. I'm saying these things are impossible in a capitalist one. When we face a problem today, something important like climate change, for example, our solutions not only need to be filtered by what will either be most profitable or, at best, hurt profits the least, but also the actual solutions we do adopt are made by industries unaccountable to the public. Under capitalism, no government, no scientific board, no body of citizens really has the power to step to the fossil fuel industry. Under socialism, under a democratic economy, a climate change level decision may still be incredibly hard to make, but most people care more about still having a planet to live on than making the line go up every year. And this way, they'll actually have the power to make that decision a reality. That is what socialists offer. A more dignified life and the democratization of power. And the only thing it will cost us is giving up on the outdated idea that there is always a profit-driven solution to our problems. There isn't, and we can do better. Socialism is the way forward for humanity. It is moral, it is just. At this point, it's common sense. We have the data, we just have a lot of work to do deprogramming ourselves from a century of Red Scare propaganda. Anyway, I hope that some of this video has resonated with you and that you'll start asking questions about socialism yourself. If you do, I've got a bunch of other videos to help you learn more. We can do this. We can build a better world. So go on. Why not be a socialist? I mentioned at the beginning of the episode that my content is only possible thanks to my patrons on...
No. This guy's like 8,000 times richer than me. This all sounds nice and everything, but unfortunately propagandized bleach demons will probably vote to make rolling smoke mandatory before fixing climate change. Yeah, sometimes I do get a little bit down whenever I read the comment section on my my local news stories. It's like, fuck, like we have so much work to do. Like, how do you like? There's like 35% of the population like is unreachable. I was out. Someone was telling me this earlier today. I was out and about today. I had to go pick up my younger brother off from the train station. I drive through downtown, and there is an anti-abortion protest with, like, you know, the usual graphic images of stillborns and stillbirths that they use. And there's people there that are like my age and younger. There's someone there in like early to mid 20s, protesting against abortion, like a young woman. It's like, what are you doing? Like, do you really not understand? Comments on my local groups right now are like, we should live stream torturing and killing the family of the gangsters' families. Hooray for the government giving impunity to us military to come fuck us up. Oh my god. Yeah, people need someone to come save them. And, you know, our task is to empower people to realize that they can save themselves. It's just going to take a lot of us, if not all of us. I'm saving this one. This is our boy. We haven't heard from Yankee Tanky in a while. He says he's no longer a communist, which, I mean, he never was, but now he's admitting it. I know. No, he was just an insane person. He throws garbage at his camera. He's someone who got bullied by Keffels, or allowed himself to get bullied by Keffels, into like not streaming for a while. Oh, let's see. So, switching gears for a minute here. Okay, we got to hear from. This was pretty good.
Criticism of Joe. We're white liberals. We say that we're not in a cult like MAGA, but then we'll dismiss any and all criticism of Joe Biden as Russian propaganda or voter suppression. We're white liberals. We use women's reproductive rights as a pawn, while ignoring that apparently the president can bypass Congress when it comes to funding a genocide, but not when it comes to codifying Roe v. Wade. We're white liberals. We'll bully you and say that if you
I'll
vote
believe
for
that when
anyone
I see
besides
it.
Biden, that you're voting for Trump, instead of helping you organize and find a different candidate that isn't
Little
a
boy
dictator
fart
or a
face, welcome.
genocider.
Thank you.
We're white liberals. We'll tokenize anyone from underrepresented groups who are in favor of Biden, while encouraging you to ignore and block anyone else who might speak out against him. We're white liberals. We'll try to scare you into voting blue by reminding you about
Anyway, resist white. This
Project
should be your
2025
favorite
and the threat
video.
of fascism under Trump. Even though people from underrepresented groups have told us that, despite its name, Project 2025 has been in motion since the 70s and 80s, and they already experienced fascism under Biden. We're white liberals. We'll gaslight others and ourselves into believing that life is significantly better under Biden, despite the fact that we're all struggling to feed our families and pay our bills. We're white
GDP is up fucking 3 points. Why aren't you happy about it?
liberals.
It's like I just
We'll
got
act as
evicted.
saviors to marginalized communities, but we'll also blame them if Biden loses and tell them they can deal
That's
with the
right, yeah.
consequences of that. Usually in graphic.
Yep. Oh my god, I've seen so many comments by white liberals on Twitter being like, "Well, enjoy your deportation under Trump then."
Detail. We're white liberals. We'll feign concern for
just fucking-
Palestinians, but we won't actually watch the raw footage of them being attacked and unalived en masse. We're white liberals.
I can't tell you how many fucking dead children I see like in my nightmares because of this fucking genocide.
We'll talk down to people of color and pretend like we know what's best for them, even though the wall's still being built and Cop City's still going up. We're white liberals. We'll watch tone-deaf Instagram posts made by our leaders and dismiss the thousands of comments streaming in demanding a ceasefire and just say that they're Russian bots. We're white liberals. We will talk over people in
Frantically working for the Palestinians. Yeah, sure.
marginalized communities instead of listening to them and trusting their lived experiences. We're white liberals. We'll be recognized as Person of the Year for giving the economy a boost with our concert sales, while staying silent in the face of a genocide and actively destroying the environment with our private planes.
Well, shots fired across the bow for
We're white liberals.
Taylor Swift.
We like to say that we'll hold our own to account, but then we'll just ignore and justify it when our own leader is complicit in war crimes.
Yep. That was like, yeah, just you have to vote for Biden. Get him elected, and then we'll hold his feet to the fire from the left. Yeah, that
We're
never
white
fucking
liberals.
happened.
We'll put BLM in our bios while simultaneously condemning another country's resistance group that was born out of an unlawful and violent occupation.
That's right. So good. I don't know how I came across this, but I bookmarked this. Anyway, I wanted to bring your attention to this incredible clip. Now, I love Trump clips. I could watch those all day.
The beer
This one's
brewed
amazing.
here, it is used to make the brew beer in this refinery. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for the Great Lakes. The beer brewed here.
Yeah, great point, Mr. Biden. Excellent. Thank you for your service, Mr. President. So that's the guy going up against
Gold and wealth. Earned that. And you know, we have more liquid gold and wealth under our feet than any other nation. We have more liquid gold, oil and gas, more liquid gold. Well, I just met non-liquid gold. You know where it was? Iowa. It's called corn. It's non-liquid. That's my take. You have more non-liquid gold. They said, what is that? I said, corn. They said, we love that idea. You know, that's a pretty cool thought, isn't it? That's a nickname in its own way, but we came up with a new couple of words for corn. Dollar cost overrun. That didn't work. They had an almost $1 billion cost overrun on the magnetic elevators. Think of it, magnets. Now, all I know about magnets is this. Give me a glass of water. Let me drop it on the magnets. That's the end of the magnets. Why didn't they use John Deere? Why didn't they bring in the John Deere people? Do you like John Deere? I like John Deere. That didn't work.
Anyway, so yeah, that's Trump talking about magnets. I just hope that they both go off script and they both just okay. Not the first time. Not the first time I've had someone do that. Anyway, so that's Trump. I just hope Trump talks about magnets while at the same time
beer
Biden
brewed
just
here
talking like this.
It is used to make the brew beer in this define. Oh, Earth Rider, thanks for the Great Lakes.
Sir, the question was about the labor crisis. So these two are going for a rematch. These clueless clowns. Election 2024. Why Genocide Joe and Trump system has to go. Communists have no illusions that serious societal change can result from the farce of bourgeois elections. Marxists understand that, at most, the oppressed are allowed, once every few years, to decide which particular representatives of the oppressing class shall represent and repress them, as Lenin expressed in State and Revolution. Nonetheless, this doesn't mean we are electoral abstentionists under all circumstances. Insofar as these charades offer openings to discuss class politics and the need for a root and branch reorganization of society, we engage with them, always reframing the issues from a working class perspective. Under certain circumstances, we may even offer critical support to a candidate or run candidates of our own. But the reality in 2024 is that, yet again, there are no viable class-independent candidates proposing solutions to the problems facing the majority. And we are not at all compelled to choose between two anti-working class options. I'll read that again. The oppressed are allowed once every few years to decide which particular representatives of the oppressing class shall represent and repress them. So really speaking, the need for class independence on the political, organizational, ideological fronts is the only principled question for Marxists. A qualitative tipping point between those who cling to the counter-revolutionary status quo and those who fight for its revolutionary overthrow. 100 years since his death, it is worth recalling Lenin's approach. Union Buster Chunk Euchre. Class independence is our most important general task. This does not exclude other partial tasks, but the latter must always be subordinate to and in conformity with it. This general premise, which is confirmed by the theory of Marxism and the whole experience of international communist movement, must be our point of departure. Only he is a Marxist who extends the recognition of the class struggle to the recognition of the dictatorship of the proletariat. This is the touchstone on which the real understanding and recognition of Marxism should be tested. So let's be absolutely clear about the meaning of class independence. In this day and age, there is no progressive wing of the bourgeoisie. Revolutionary communists fight for a workers' government and do not give any support to any capitalist party or politician. This has been the position of genuine Marxists for well over a century. Unfortunately, for many decades, our ideas were like a voice in the wilderness. But today, after a generation of constant crisis and yet another demoralizing democratic administration, millions of young people are drawing precisely this conclusion. In the absence of unless of course you join Communist Party USA, in which case they've been shilling for the Democrats since like the 1930s, and that's how you get, incredible writers like Angela Davis, who wrote some really great stuff, get absolutely lib brain poison, and joined ranks and, fought against Bernie and is sipping champagne with Barack Obama and Martha's Vineyard. In the absence of a mass working class alternative, the politics of lesser evilism succeeded for decades in dividing and duping millions of voters into believing that Democrats were somehow more worker-friendly than the Republicans. But 8 years of Obama disabused millions of that illusion, and a few thousand voters in a handful of swing states brought Donald Trump roaring to the White House. After 4 years of Trumpite dystopia, the liberals' favorite ploy worked once again, as Biden's promise of a return to normality regained them the presidency. However, normality. The normality of capitalism is crisis, austerity, war, revolution, counter-revolution, and the Democrats' incompetence and complicity in the crimes of imperialism has been fully exposed. It speaks volumes that when compared to Wall Street's bumbling octogenarian puppet, a billionaire real estate fraud from Manhattan is seen as a straight-talking man of the people by significant layers of the population. Biden's only job is to be a figurehead, but he can't even pull that off. Despite Trump's demagogic talk of dictatorship, vengeance, and mass deportations, the Democrats' lesser evil arguments is falling on deaf ears. These two photos are way too flattering. The reason is simple. On Biden's watch, Roe v. Wade fell and abortion has been banned or restricted in 21 states. Even though the Democrats have controlled the presidency and both houses of Congress on multiple occasions in the last several decades, inflation continues and average household debt stands at $103,000. Jesus Christ. That's up 11% from 2020. More than 800 million people worldwide experience hunger or food insecurity, including 1 in 6 American children. Yeah, how many times have I been harping on this, eh? Meanwhile, JP Morgan Chase Bank just had the most profitable year in U.S. banking history. The world's 5 richest men have more than doubled their gluttonous hoards since 2020, and the world's first trillionaire may emerge within a decade. Big Oil more than doubled its profits in 2022, raking in $219 billion, blowing away the previous record. The sick joke making the rounds at Dubai's COP28 climate summit was that the best way to transition away from fossil fuels is to burn through them as quickly as possible. Total global military expenditure has reached a new high of $2.24 trillion, leading to a lucrative arms race as 110 armed conflicts rage around the planet. 2022 saw a record 71.1 million internally displaced people, more than double the number in 2012, and this was before Gaza. The criminal slaughter of the Palestinians living in the world's largest open-air prison is being aided and abetted directly by Genocide Joe. For millions, and particularly the youth, this sheer inhumanity was the final nail in the coffin of lesser evilism. Their conscience will no longer allow them to hold their noses in the desperate hope that their votes will shift the balance of the undemocratic and reactionary Supreme Court. They no longer buy into the argument of so-called harm reduction, a disgusting lie peddled by the system's liberal socialist apologists. As surely as they know in their bones that Trump is a mortal enemy, they feel the same about Biden. They have correctly concluded, no matter how you dress it up, scaremonger or scapegoat, the other party evil is evil. So yeah, it's 99% Hitler or 100% Hitler. However, mass dissatisfaction with the Democrats does not mean the majority of Americans are right-wing reactionaries. On the contrary, most people merely want stability, good jobs and wages, and a safe and healthy place to raise a family. But this simply isn't possible for everyone under capitalism. The exploitation of wage labor by capital and the relentless drive for profits precludes this. As an arch-capitalist himself, Trump can't square the circle either, and he is merely filling the political vacuum in a temporary and distorted way. This is a really great way to put it. There is a political vacuum that Trump filled. You know, Trump is not the cause of all of these problems. Trump is a symptom. And that's something that even liberals really forget. If reelected, those workers attracted by his poisonous bravado will eventually realize that no American president can magically wave their problems away. From the majority, it is common knowledge that nothing will be resolved on the election day. Oh, by the way, speaking of liberal socialists that I was talking about, I finally ended, and maybe it took me way too long to do so, but I finally ended my subscription to Majority Report. As in, like, I'm no longer giving them money. Like, I still have their RSS feed. So I might listen in once in a while, but, like, I cannot take another 7-8 months. Yeah, it was $10 a month for the full show. I can't take another fucking 7-8 months of him yelling at his own viewers and his own callers, the people who call in, the people who are like, I cannot in good conscience vote for Joe Biden. Sorry, it's not happening. And then him getting fucking pissed about it. Like, fuck you. I'm sorry. Like, yeah. Unfortunately, I never heard his position on Libya. That was well before the time that I was. That's a very surprising position of his, because he founded the show as an anti-war radio host. Mass dissatisfaction with the Democrats does not mean a majority of Americans are right-wing reactionaries. On the contrary, most people merely want stability, good jobs and wages, and a safe and healthy place to raise a family. A lot of us got duped by Obama. Yeah, true. Also, his libertarian debates are hilarious. And I will say, in Sam Cedars' defense, his show has also been extremely good on trans people issues, as well as Israel-Palestine, honestly. They've been very good at, like, just no gray areas when it comes to Israel. Like, they are a fascist, genocidal, apartheid state. So on those two contemporary issues, they've been very good. But they cannot take off those blinders for the Democrat Party. And it's very disappointing, and I just can't listen to it anymore. He's still a two-stater? Yeah, a lot of those guys are. Even I've disappointed with his producer Matt Leck, who is ostensibly a Marxist, supposedly a Marxist, also gets in on the yelling at phone callers. Most people merely want stability, good jobs and wages, and a safe and healthy place to raise a family, but this simply isn't possible for everyone under capitalism. The exploitation of wage labor by capital and the relentless drive for profits precludes this. I already read this. For the majority, it is common knowledge that nothing will be resolved on election day, no matter who carries the day. The persistence and elan of the Gaza Solidarity movement is proof that the subterranean smoldering goes far beyond electoral politics. Millions have drawn the conclusion that what is needed is not yet another election, but a concerted struggle to change society. What keeps the billionaires up at night is the risk of this mood erupting into open revolt. Emma Vigeland is sus. Yeah, I agree. Although, like I said, though, she actually changed my mind on, trans athletes in sports, because she's like a big sports person. So, like, credit where credit's due. I was trying to look at the positives of things that I've gained from certain parasocial relationships I have with my favorite podcasters. And I will say, like, Chapo Trap House, they're a little bit to the left of Sam Cedar, and they've been very consistent for the last 4 years of fuck Joe Biden, we are not voting for Joe Biden. So, kudos to them. he used to employ Nomiki. They stopped talking actually after Nomiki ran in a New York 25th district against like 3 other like DSA candidates and like split the vote. And they're like, no, we endorse the DSA. We endorse the DSA candidates. We're not endorsing you. And that was the end of that relationship. Were you there? Nomiki actually raided this channel once. They brought in like 15 viewers. It's like, how could you be like a chronically online streamer and only have 15 viewers? Yeah, I was confused. I'm like, wait, is this the Nomiki? I'm like, you know the politics of this channel, right? Crispin on Vouch. I love fucking Matt Crispin. It's so good. What do you want me to do? Jangle keys in front of his face? He's like one of the dumbest people I've ever encountered. Oh my god. Yeah, I fucking love I love Matt Christmas so much. Thank you, Cupcake Star, for spending 5,000 points on the mummy scream. You pricks. I gotta see if I can find it. FYM, so this is a really funny Twitch channel. These guys, they just watch like shitty like YouTube food review channels all the time. It's so fucking good. Anyway, Matt Christman, you know, he had that bad illness a little while ago. He had some so they posted their favorite clip of Matt Christman reacting to Robozoid. I gotta see if I can find it because it's so fucking good. Yeah, these guys are great. They're also giant assholes, but that's fine. Kind of have to be, I guess, on this platform. Damn it, where is it? Sorry, I'm subjecting you to all this trauma. Chunk Yogurt trying to talk reason into his sissy nephew's head, but his sissy nephew wasn't having it. Yeah, this is it. This is my favorite Matt Christman clip. So this is Robozoid. He's some asshole. He's talking about Dwayne The Rock Johnson, and he calls him the Dwayne The Rockhead Johnson. So named for the rocks in his head, and Matt Christman just loses his goddamn mind.
Dwayne The Rockhead Johnson, so named after the rocks in his head. Basically yucking it up with Kamala Harris and creepy Joe Biden. And, well, it was...
I wish she was louder.
He's got rock.
Yeah, this is it. See if I can get this louder.
Completely bald. Frankly, there you have it. Dwayne The Rockhead Johnson, so named after the rocks in his head. Basically yucking it up with Kamala Harris and creepy Joe Biden. And, well, it wasn't an interview.
He's got rocks in his head.
That's a lie. I don't know what the hell that was. What was I looking at? Oh well. This has been the Robin's Way. There's gotta be some
Yeah, we should show him at the AOC,
who are
dude.
at least willing to listen to the man. I'll see you all later.
Yeah, I'll do the AOC one.
Yeah.
He has tears flying down his face. Oh God.
You? No, I didn't. What, on Twitter or over their podcast or something like that?
Yeah, no, that Vouch guy, people want me to debate him, and I've looked What's the debate? What would you want me to jangle keys in front of his face? He seems like one of the dumbest people I've ever encountered.
sorry, Matt Chrisman and Trayon talk shit about you? No, I didn't. What, on Twitter or over their podcast or something like that?
Yeah, no, that Vouch guy, people want me to debate him, and I've looked What's the debate? What would you want me to jangle keys in front of his face? He seems like one of the dumbest people I've ever encountered.
Oh yeah, listen to this fucking guy. Listen, I'm so on Vouch, but literally Matt Chrisman added nothing to Chapo in like 95% of any episode. Wrong. Absolutely wrong. He thinks so highly of himself. He should learn to be entertaining, not just the guy that fills awkward pauses on his own podcast. Oh, that's so incorrect. Matt Chrisman is like the best commenter from Chapo Trap House. Vouch identified. Just jangle keys in front of his face. If this stream ever gets big enough and Vouch somehow decides to like come bother me, I'm just gonna pull my keys out and just start jangling him until he goes away. I think that'd be really funny. Should I do that? Dwayne the Rockhead Johnson. So named for the rocks in his head. Anyway, that's such a good quote. Okay, so billionaires are kept up at night. They're so worried that hundreds of the ultra rich recently published a petition, all but begging to be taxed more heavily. Video and audio way out of sync? Really? You might have to hit refresh. How's that? Like, try refreshing your browser. I got no warnings or problems on my end. Its video is behind by a second or two. What the fuck? Sorry, you're gonna hear some echoing. So just give me a sec. Sorry, you're gonna hear some echoing. So just give me a sec. Sorry, you're gonna hear some echoing. Okay, that's really fucking weird. I got my Twitch channel open here. Man, Twitch has been a lot of fucking stupid ass problems lately. I wonder what that's about. What about YouTube? All right, I'm gonna try YouTube. See how that's looking. I wonder what that's about. No, YouTube's bad too. Fuck. YouTube. All right, I'm gonna try YouTube. See how that's looking. Maybe it's Amazon. Yeah, maybe, or it could be my could be Streamlabs. I don't know. This is really annoying. Maybe I'll Pesos forget to pay the internet bill. Yeah, probably. Maybe I'll have to end the stream and I'll come back in. Man, I'm slowly gaining viewers too. Stupid. All right, guys, I'm gonna be right back in like 10 seconds. Okay, just make sure you click the click that refresh button